Hello and welcome to this instalment of Talkin Trim. I'm Jonathon Skinner and today we're looking at the front seat covers and related seat hardware for the Jaguar E-Types. Now this video is purely focused on the 4.2 litre E-Types. Effectively the 3.8 litre Series 1s had a completely different seat, which were the bucket style seats, like those, look like an egg. We're not talking about those, but I have done other videos showing those with the seat covers and the seat hardware, so be sure to check those out if that is your spec. We're talking about this style of seat here, which is what they used on the Series 1 4.2, the Series 1.5 and the Series 2s. The Series 3s were extremely similar. In fact, some of the parts are identical, but I have done a completely separate video for the Series 3s because there are enough differences in them that you shouldn't take everything here as gospel. So if you have a Series 3 or a Series 1 3.8, then please do refer to the other videos. This is purely focused on the Series 1 4.2, the Series 1.5 and the Series 2s. And what we've got here is a sort of an array of different bits and bobs. So we got two sets of seat covers. We're in the process of trimming up the Series 2. So what I've done is we've fully trimmed up one seat there, then we set up the hardware on the other seat there, and then that is that set of seat covers there. But what I've also done, because we're doing a few at the same time here, we've got a Series 1 4.2 here, because I wanted to go over the subtle differences between the seat covers and the materials that they used. And then obviously we've got the array of hardware, which is pretty much shared all the way through the Series 1 4.2s up until the end of the Series 2 production. There are some subtle differences which I'll mention, but for the most part they're the same. Now let's dive into the actual seat covers first, shall we? So firstly, OEM specification, how they left the factory. They left with leather seat covers. Now, we refer to it as leather-faced. Other companies out there refer to it as leather, which can be a bit misleading, I find. Leather-faced basically means the facings of the seats are leather. So the bits that touch your body when you actually sit in them are leather. And generally speaking, the backs and the surrounds are either vinyl and or moquette, dependent on the era of the car. Now, we can also offer a full leather seat where we replace any elements of vinyl with leather as well. So that's why we like to clarify that, because other companies just refer to them as leather. That sometimes is confused with our full leather option, which is not the case. I don't think many companies out there actually offer a full leather version of the seat like us, so bear that in mind. So strictly speaking, from the factory, they left in leather faced, or leather as most people refer to it. The Series 1s, they had plain pleated panels like this, so there was no pattern on them whatsoever, whereas the Series 2s commonly left with this embossed pattern on the pleats. Not all of them, but the majority of them there. Series 1.5s, it's anyone's guess. It really does depend on when they were getting made in the factory. Some of them left pretty much identical to Series 1s. Some of them left almost identical to Series 2s. So always take Series 1.5s with a massive bowl of salt almost, because of the inconsistencies on the production line. But the general rule of thumb, Series 1s were plain pleats. Series 2s were embossed pleats. Also related to the Series 1s, they used Moquette for the retainer here and Moquette for the backrests here. Now Moquette is a very sort of short pile wool based product with no real backing on it as such, not like a sort of rubber backing like the carpet, but effectively it's a wool product, so it's very, very similar to the sort of wool carpet element of things. And for the Series 1s and some of the Series 1.5s, they used Moquette for the backs of the backrest and for the retainers, as per this picture here actually. You can see, whereas the Series 2s, they changed it to vinyl for the retainer there and vinyl for the back of the backrest there. So bear that in mind. So that's the main kind of obvious differences between the Series 1 and the Series 2 in terms of the styling and the materials used. Now it's worth mentioning as well that when it comes to leather, we can offer a couple of different versions. So we have, what we effectively have is our grained leather here, and then we have our smooth leather there. So you can see the texture finish on the surface grain there. Both of these have been done in grained leather, just FYI, but we can offer grained or smooth. We can also offer Connolly Vomal as well, which is the official leather that Jaguar used way back when. There is a surcharge related to that, and I've done a blog post related to it. And actually, I think I've done a couple of videos showcasing some Connolly Vomal. So if you're interested in that, do talk to us, because it's a very unique leather. But most people are going for either the grained or the smooth on those elements there. Apart from that, the seat covers are very similar. They are actually subtly different, and it's all related to the frame. Effectively, the Series 1s, the frame's only tilted, the seat's only tilted forward, as per this here, where it's tilting forward. whereas the Series 2s, they tilted forward, but they also reclined back, so you could effectively recline the seat back there. So it's worth keeping that in mind. And that did subtly change the mainly the cushion covers here. You can actually see it's all related to the width of these pieces here. So to look at, they're pretty much the same, but overall they are different, and a notable difference there. Now with regards to the specifications, obviously from the factory, I've mentioned the Leatherfaced, so let's just clarify what that exactly means. So the top part here, you've got the pleated panel, you've got the side bolsters, pleated panel, side bolsters, they're always leather, and the surround is then vinyl normally from the factory. Now it is worth noting on some of the early Series 1 4.2s, that's sometimes left in leather. We can obviously accommodate those needs if that's what you want, but standardly the majority of them left with vinyl on the surrounds there. Obviously the retainer is vinyl or moquette depending on the era of your car, and with regard to the pleated panels, it's either going to be plain or embossed. With the pleats, as with all of our pleated panels, they are genuine chuck and roll pleats in there, so it actually gets slit in. You end up slitting a 18mm foam, and you actually sew the leather in and then back out, so you actually have a proper genuine pleat in there. We don't just stitch down it, which a lot of people out there just do, is effectively just stitch on top there. That's not a proper pleat. We do genuine tuck and roll pleats. You can see there from the fold as it goes in there. So that's effectively the spec for the cushions. For the backrest, very similar concept. The bits that touch your body, these bits here, so pleated panel and side bolsters, are leather. Actually, the surrounds that separates the front and the back is also leather on E-Types. And then the back was either moquette or vinyl, depending on the spec of the car / the era of the car there. Now, it is worth noting as well, obviously, that the Series 2s tended to have headrests, which... it's a bit of an interesting story with this one, actually. So we have done some headrests. So these are the headrest covers. Again, sort of early Series 2s, this centre panel here would have been plain, whereas the later ones would have been embossed leather to match the pleats there. They did actually have a very rare version of a headrest, which is what we refer to as the pleated barrel headrest, because it actually has small pleats in it and it looks like a barrel. So we can offer that as well. Not many cars that ever left the factory with those there, but we do have the patterns, and I'm sure I've done a video detailing that. So if you want to have a look at that, be sure to check that out. Some of which of the videos will be linked at the end there. Now, not all Series 2s left with headrests. In fact, this seat here was a good example of that. So when the seats came to us, they didn't have headrests. They had the headrest chrome and they had the plastic finisher in them, which I'll show you in a second in the book. But luckily the framework actually did accommodate for the frame, for the headrest rather. So for the headrest work, you have to have this element of the framework on there, because that's where it slots in there. So what you find is quite a few of the cars actually left with an allowance for a headrest, but not necessarily fitted with a headrest. And therefore you can choose to add headrests at a later date, which is what this customer's doing with this one here. And I will be doing a video showcasing the fully trimmed up seats with the headrest when they're done. But what you tend to find, if I can find the page correctly, there we are, perfect. There you are. So that is what I'm referring to there. A lot of the cars left with allowance for a headrest, but they had the stoppers in the top there. I think it was all related to legislation, law changes in America due to safety, effectively. And so they started having to put headrests in there by law. So they quickly, obviously, made a fix for it, but then didn't necessarily fit headrest to all the cars. If they weren't going to the American market, then they didn't need them by law. So I think that's the background to it there. So that's effectively the background to the actual seat covers and headrest covers. Now let's dive into the seat hardware. Oh, just before I do, actually, sorry. In terms of seat covers are sold as a car set, so two seats, a pair of seats effectively. Headrests are sold separately, again as a pair. Generally speaking, as a rule of thumb, we sell everything in car sets, so enough to do a car set of whatever part it is you're doing. So for example, door panels, we sell them as a pair of door panels. Seat covers, we sell them as a pair of seat covers effectively. The seat covers and the headrest covers are included as standard in our trim kit, but all of the seat hardware is sold as an optional extra, so outside of the scope of the trim kit. Now, majority of people do buy trim kits, which is effectively a complete interior package, but of course we can sell those parts individually. But when I say individually, I do mean in car sets, so everything in pairs effectively. Now, let's move on to the seat hardware. So you effectively got the base element of the seat, which is the bit your bum goes on, and then you've got the backrest squab, which is the bit you lean against there. So like I say, ignore the quantities in this video. Everything is sold in pairs, enough to do a car set's worth. Okay, so let's start with the cushion bases, the bit your bum goes on. So the most obvious thing is obviously the seat foams. They are handed. They have the sort of slot cutaway there for obviously where the gearbox juts out. They have this groove along here, which is obviously where this side seam happens on the underneath of the cover, and that's actually the crucial point for when you start trimming, but I will touch on that a bit later. So they're sold as a pair, and they are molded latex foams akin to the original ones. They have the holes in the bottom of them, and we sell those in a pair. We then had the tacking strips. Now the tacking strips went on the very outer edge of the seats there on the underneath of the frame, and it just meant that when you're trimming round, you had something to tack onto underneath the seat, which makes the job a little bit easier. And then you had the diaphragms. So the diaphragms go underneath the foams, and they effectively act as a bit of a spring. So that's effectively what you need for the seat cushions, obviously in pairs. I will show you all of this on the seats in a second as well, just FYI. Moving on to the backrest, you had the backrest padding kit, which is fibre hair, rubberized horsehair, whatever you want to refer to it as. Now it's worth noting that we've made a generic pattern that suits all the series 1s up until the series 3s, in fact. So you'll find that you might have to make subtle alterations to that to get it to fit to the frame. I think the series 3s off the top of my head are slightly wider, whereas the earlier ones are slightly narrower. I will demonstrate on this one in a second, but it becomes very obvious during the fitment process, and I will go over that process with you in a second there. So you have the backrest padding kit. You can see here, it's obviously got the side bolsters, which is for the left and right sides. And then you've got this bit here, which again, something we've added. It's effectively extra lumbar support, but you can take it off if you want. I don't think it's effectively an original feature of the horsehair kits from the factory, but we've added it over time, and some people like it, some people leave it effectively. And then on the back, you have this element here where it's bridged there. Now, what you effectively end up doing is taking that off and re-gluing it around the frame. Again, it really does depend on the spec of your seat. That's generally how you do it there. So you can see it's effectively bridged the gap. The frame goes in the middle of it there. Just FYI. So that's the backrest padding kit. Again, they are sold as a set of 2, enough for 1 car. Then you have the tacking strips. So the tacking strips on the backrest go at the very bottom of the backrest down there. Now, these are ones that actually do subtly change between the different series, and we can accommodate for all. It's basically denoted by whether it's a tilt only, i.e. forward only, or a tilt and recline. So bear that in mind, but we've got the spec for all of them. Again, I will show you where they go on the seat in a second. Then you have the lumbar straps, which effectively go down at the very bottom of the frame there, and just add the lumbar support element of things. They are original for the car. And then you had the webbing rings on the back, which is effectively a diaphragm for the backrest there. Now, the webbing rings are just sold as the rings, the rubber rings. You're effectively meant to reuse your original clips. If you don't have any original clips, as per this customer, we recommend using hog rings and a hog ring gun, which is easily available on Amazon. In fact, we might start supplying them as well. So bear that in mind if you come up short. So that is effectively the main hardware you need for the setup of the seats there. Now, let me just show you actually on the seats themselves. So firstly, let's start with the, excuse me, let's start with the webbings. You can see there, you had all these little clips joining them together. Now, the Series 3s had one originally from the factory where they were always joined together like that, and that's the kit we do here. Now, interestingly, when we stripped these seats down, they were fitted. They weren't original seats, well, original seat frames, but they had been retrimmed probably about 20 years ago or something like that, and they had these in. So, interesting point that you can, in theory, use a Series 3 version on a 4.2 litre frame. It fits absolutely fine. But this is what came off, but that, strictly speaking, is incorrect for the Series 1 to Series 2 models. The Series 1 to Series 2s had these rings, as per in that bag over there, and then we've used hog rings to join them all together like that, and that effectively adds the spring on the backrest there. So interesting bit of info that you can actually interchange them if you want, but we wanted to keep things how it left the factory. So you can see here the other elements of the setup there. So you can see that's the tacking strip there down the bottom, so it goes down the bottom of the frame, and then you wrap the material around and tack on. Now you'll note that sometimes the tacking strips can be a bit thicker, and therefore you might just want to drill out slightly to get them to fit correctly on the frame. You might have to make very subtle alterations to them as well to get them to fit properly, but for the most part they're absolutely fine. So that's the element of the woodwork, and obviously the webbings there. You can see the lumbar strap there goes from side to side. The lumbar straps do come with the clips on them already, and then you've obviously got the backrest horsehair there, which I've already commented on how that's a separate piece there. Now you'll see here these two strips here, that's roughly what we've taken off the left and right edges of the backrest padding kit to get it to fit properly. Now it's worth noting, if you have to alter the backrest padding kit, you want to be taking these side bolsters off, trimming down the main section, and then gluing these back on. You don't want to make these any narrower, you only want to make the main bases a bit narrower. Obviously you'll have to trim out a bit of the lumbar support if you're keeping that as well, so bear that in mind. Seat foam, obviously fairly straightforward what happens there. They are handed, obviously that's the cutaway there, so this is the right hand seat as you're facing forward in the car, because it's got the cutaway for the gearbox. And then on the underside you've got the diaphragm on the bottom there. The diaphragm do come with the clips already inserted on them. That's a bit of a pain to get those fitting in there. They're meant to be extremely tight, and they are that, so bear that in mind. And then that's where that corner tacking strip goes on, so you put it on there, and then that allows you to tack around the material. Now it is worth noting, originally from the factory they also had this element of tacking strip going all the way around, but we don't actually bother using that. We surpass that. I'll explain why in a second. Let's just move over to this trimmed up seat here as an example. So you can see, there you go, tacking on the corner there, we're using a wood bit, but we've actually just glued it all the way around. Normally you, or rather originally from the factory, you would be tacking all the way in there. Now the problem with that is it's a very one-way street, and trimming is an organic process, so you might need during the trimming process to sort of trim bits and then untrim them and redo them. If you're tacking in there, you have set a line in the sand effectively of where that material needs to go to, because obviously as soon as you start tacking, you're getting holes in the material which will not disappear if you have to move the material. So that's why we prefer to actually glue, and you just use nice contact adhesive, very strong contact paste on adhesive all the way around, and that's not going anywhere. It's the same stuff we've used for years, so we know it works absolutely fine. So that for me is the better way of trimming these elements here, so bear that in mind. Couple of other tidbits of advice, I'd say. This isn't meant to be a trimming video, but I do like to impart a bit of advice where possible. Firstly, upholstery wadding. This stuff, we can sell this we sell it in 8-meter bags, which is ample for any seat really, but this is very useful stuff. It helps pad out the gap between foams and seat covers sometimes if you have these sort of air gaps on them, but actually a lot of people choose to use wadding around this section here. In fact, in this very useful book here with Mick, you can see he's using a similar sort of material, wrapping it around there. Again, it's an organic process, so I'd say we don't tend to go all the way around like he's done there, but it's whatever works during the trimming process there. So that's also a useful piece of sort of material to have. Most trimmers and upholsterers will have that as standard in their workshop, but if they don't, or you're taking the job on yourself, we can of course supply it, so do bear that in mind there. And then I'd say the other main factor to consider with generally seat covers, but especially elements of these seat covers, is they're not plug and play. You can't expect the seat cover to just go over the top of the foam or the frame and for everything to fit nice and dandy. We get a lot of people who will initially marry up, say, the cushion covers to these foams here, and the foam is bigger than the seat cover, and they're like, well, how does this work? You must have made something wrong. And it's not that at all. It's the fact that basically to get the ultimate definition as per that, which is what you're really looking for when a seat's done. You need to cram the foam in and lock it into the cover effectively, and then it will then automatically want to push out again, and that's what gives you all the definition around there. Now, the starting point on the foams here is definitely this element here, and then we tend to basically glue there, there, and there, and then that anchors it down. You've effectively got the cover kind of inside out, and then you're pulling and wrapping it round. But actually, we tend to find that you don't actually go right in that groove there. You go ever so slightly above it. Not much, just ever so slightly above with this cross seam here. And that, for us, works perfectly. You end up getting a very nice finish. You get this nice sort of plumpness as it comes up. Let's try and get the definition in this video here. So you get a lovely definition and plumpness as it goes down and up effectively there. But also it really helps here, and these are the quite problematic areas on these seats. But if we found if you move it ever so slightly forward, it makes this area easier to trim around there. Now, we do have the luxury of steamers on site as well, which is a very useful tool when you're trimming a seat. Again, most professional trimmers will have a steamer in their workshop because it does help with these elements here. But genuinely, the only bit we did a tiny bit of steaming there just to minimize a little bit of a wrinkle that we had. But overall, they were pretty much exactly how you see them now. And that's down to generally the seat styling lends itself to an easier finish if you know what you're doing. But then after that is experience of what you're knowing in terms of the trimming process there. So I'd say, yeah, I think I've covered my bases there. Like I say, this is going to feature a few other versions of video when we end up trimming the second seat there, which I'll obviously include the headrest covers in. But like I say, be sure to check out my other videos on the YouTube channel, because I have done ones dedicated to the seat covers, to the headrest covers, to different stylings of things, different materials, etc. So it is worth checking those out. But I wanted to do a very basic overview of the styling differences between Series 1 and Series 2s, and then a basic overview of the hardware and how it all roughly goes together before you start the trimming process. But as you can see, really nice job on these thus far. Looking forward to getting the second one done and doing some videos and some photos for you guys. Hope you found it useful. Please remember to like, share and subscribe. Of course, if you have any questions about your E-Type restoration, please do not hesitate to contact us either via email or via the website. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.